Okay, folks, I think we're going to get started. Thank you so much for being here. It really is a pleasure to have all of you in this room. My name is George Damian, and today I have the pleasure of moderating this panel from Earth to Mars and back again using deep tech to solve energy challenges. So one thing I want to say right off the bat, our hope is to give everyone here an opportunity. This is a really great panel we've got, and you're going to hear a little bit about them in a second. But please, we're going to keep about 10 minutes to the end. Have your questions. Please feel free to ask them, and we're going to get to it. So I'm going to start off by asking the panelists to introduce themselves. Ariel, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. My name is Ariel Torre. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Impossible Sensing Energy. We are a clean tech startup. We are helping right now oil and gas producers produce clean energy.
Easy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Fiorentino. I'm the VP of Operations at Crescent Point Energy. We are an oil and gas producer, and we had a big problem that we needed solved. You'll hear about that.
Hi, my name is Johnston. I'm one of 10 technology development advisors in Alberta that works with Alberta Innovates, and Ariel is one of my over 200 clients.
Awesome. And I'm George Damian, director of a strategy and design studio in town called Press Play. I also serve as an MBA instructor at the Askin School of Business as part of the CDL program. And so that's maybe where I'll start, is that the predecessor company, Impossible Sensing, came through the incubator through 2019, 2020. They were obviously focused on deep tech. And as you're going to hear in a moment, they pivoted quite strongly. They're actually in several different verticals. The reason their founder, Pablo, could not be here today is he's actually on a boat near Hawaii testing out some of their technology for minerals. So Ariel, maybe first question to you. So that's a good question here. From Earth to Mars and back again. Can you explain to us how tech that was developed for Mars, and I believe is on the Mars Rover, ends up helping out folks like Crescent Point?
Yeah. So the technology was developed by NASA around 2005. I think there's around $200 million that were spent to develop this technology. 80 million of that, well, 200 million was what was spent to actually seek for life in Mars. Out of the 200, around 80 million were spent on this specific technology. And out of those 80, 8 millions ended up with Impossible Sensing, which is the affiliate of Impossible Sensing Energy. Mm-hmm. So, like you said, in 2019, my co-founder and partner attended a business accelerator here, and it was put in front of oil producers. And they had a problem. So we went in and looked into the problem, and we realized, oh, okay, some of the things that we are doing for NASA apply here. And I think the key to this is to understand that life is carbon-based, right? So what the instrument in the Mars Rover is doing is looking for traces of potential past life. And that potential past life looks exactly like what we are producing in Alberta. So that was the connection. And one of the things that we didn't understand at the time was, okay, how come that, these guys don't really have full visibility of these productions real time? So it was then when we said, okay, these technologies that right now in the Mars Rover can help. And that was the connection.
Mm-hmm. Maybe, Rob, let us know, so you alluded to this at the start, but what was the problem? I know when we were in the break room, we were talking about, it seemed like a massive problem to you guys, and then once you got connected to Impossible Sensing, maybe they kind of felt like they had a solution. What was kind of the origin of the two of you getting connected, and what was your problem that you needed solved?
Yeah, so the origin, where it started from was our former CEO was was like one of those dragons or whatever they're called.
Yeah, he was
a mentor at CDL, the Creative Destructive Lab, and he reached out to me. He wasn't at the company anymore, and he reached out to me and he said, hey, you might want to talk to these Impossible Sensing guys. I think they might have something to solve that well testing problem we have. So, okay. So that's when I reached out to Ariel and Pablo and brought them into our shop to describe the problem. So that was the origin of the problem. And what the problem is that in oil and gas, you produce, you've seen, I'm sure you've all seen those pump jacks on the prairies. And they produce, you'd think it's oil, but it's not oil. It's a combination of oil and water and gas. And it's all intermingled. And you can't measure that without very expensive tools to measure that. And what you have to do is it's no different. If I give you a jar of salad dressing, of oil and vinegar, that kind of a salad dressing, and said shake it really fast, and then put it on the table and say how much oil is in there and how much vinegar is in there. You'd say, well, I need time. I need it to separate, and then I can tell you the proportion of oil and the proportion of vinegar. So we kind of have a similar problem with the fluid that comes out of the earth. Is it's all mixed, and it takes longer to separate. It takes like many hours, like overnight, and you apply heat to it, and it's this whole expensive process of testing every well, and every well has to be tested once a month. So it's an expensive problem of doing this. And so what we did is we brought them in, and they said, okay, so describe the problem to us. And we started describing the problem, kind of how I explained it to you. And they said, well, that sounds like something we might be able to solve. So I said, we're going to take videos of this. So we went and took videos of an operator wearing coveralls and taking this sample out of the wellhead and waiting 24 hours for this, coming back the next day, and then taking this calculator and figuring out the oil cut and the water cut from this total sample and saying, that's what we do. And we build like pipelines to do test measurement. Like we spend a lot of money on testing, and every well requires it. It's a regulatory requirement that it has to happen once a month. So we show Impossible Sensing these videos. And I remember watching these brilliant minds from NASA and everything, staring at these like really, pretty basic videos saying, this is how it happens? Like this is how you test, this is how you measure oil cut and water cut in an oil, really? Yeah, this is our problem. It is a very large, lucrative problem for you to solve if you can solve it. Can you solve it? And I remember them like looking at each other like, yeah, we can so solve this. And
here you are.
Here we are, yeah.
So suffice it to say, that was a massive problem that didn't have a very sophisticated solution.
Okay, so here's what I'll say. It didn't have a affordable, sophisticated solution. We could equip wells with, we found a solution for this because we tried solving this problem 4 or 5 years ago, and we got it solved. But it costs about $50,000 a well, and that is not economic at all. You just couldn't. It's not an economic solution. But that was as cheap as we could do it, and that was us saying, "Okay, we know we can do this. We know we can do this." And that was as cheap as we could do it. So what I kept preaching to Ariel is, "Okay, I know you guys can do this, but it has to be a Walmart solution. Like, I don't want to spend money. It can't be expensive. Just tell me what I need to know. I just need to know the water cut and the oil cut." Regardless of the rate of the fluid coming at it. Like keep it simple, cheap, simple, and then we can scale this thing, and you can throw this thing on every well in the continent. Like you guys would solve this problem and you build a big, big business out of this.
So Kara, let's talk about that. So you're hearing, obviously, it's almost a leading question at this point, but tell us when and why does Alberta Innovates get interested in something like this?
Sure. So I actually met Ariel and Pablo through Pathways Alliance, formerly COSIA, for those of you that don't know. And they were working with Pathways Alliance on some of these industry problems. And so then they were saying, you know what, you should connect with Alberta Innovates. They might have some programs. And so I actually was connected to Ariel and Pablo through that. And then I put them through our Connect With Us portal through Alberta Innovates. And then they were officially my client. And so it was a bit fortuitous for us, I guess, because in my former life, prior to being a TDA, I was a Dean of Energy at a college, and I also, in a life prior to that, owned oil and gas service company, and so I know all about water trucks, oil trucks, semi-vacs, and about hauling water, oil, and oil sand out of tanks. So it was a pretty good match.
And what was something that pinged you, though, about this? Because I imagine you're seeing a ton of stuff, right? Like a ton of stuff that really sounds interesting or it could potentially work. Is there something that was particularly kind of appealing that you thought, oh, there's something here, or I'm excited to work with these folks?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I loved their story. I love the fact that they worked with NASA. You know, they had this really cool creative thing that was on Mars, but then they were able to take that technology and also apply it to those real world problems and real world problems that I had seen, right? And the fact that their market opportunity is incredible, right? And it's not just one producer, one energy company, it's multiple energy companies. So it's a very scalable solution. I love that it was economic, right? You can have the best solution in the world, but if it's not an economical solution, right, then it's not applicable in that industry. And then the other thing too is that whenever we have the opportunity to take a system or a process that is done by hand, where there's a huge margin for error, right, in a really big industry. If there's an opportunity to automate that and to base it on science and to come out with a really accurate accounting number from that, that's pretty fantastic. So, you know, they had a huge market, they had a really good technology that was scalable, right, and applicable to not just one industry.
Awesome. Ariel, let's talk a little bit about when you have that initial meeting. Obviously, it sounded like Rob was pretty bullish. And it makes sense, obviously, you're going to want to be connecting with customers. That's your path to revenue, profitability, and all that stuff. But what do you gain from engaging with a corporate player or even someone like a Pathways Alliance early on? What's kind of the knowledge they bring or the insight? How do they make you better by doing it early in the process versus waiting until you have something a little bit more, let's say, off the shelf?
Well, I think the main thing is that you are working on a real problem and on a real need. We were discussing earlier that it's very easy to see a perceived need, but you know, when it comes to time to selling that product, that may not be what the customer really wants. Right? So engaging early really helps you get on the right track. I mean, we've been meeting with Crescent and with Pathways Alliance every month for almost more than a year now, right? So our design is really guided by the final customer.
And what are you getting out of that? When you're meeting with them regularly, if you hadn't met them yet, or if it had been 6 months or something like that, what's like the insight? Has it actually changed the way you've approached
Oh,
things?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
About that.
Yeah, for instance, what Rob was mentioning about cost and, you know, the type of specifications that are required, where do you want this installed, how do you want it installed, what size should have, how should be transported, right? How are you going to consume the data? Do you want us to do that, or can you put it into your system? I mean, there's a significant input from the final customer.
Rob, from your guys' standpoint, I think late in 2022 there was a successful pilot, and let us know kind of where do things stand now? What's the status, and how does it look going forward for you guys in Impossible?
Yeah, so a successful pilot at the end of 22, and it just fueled the next stage of development and an appetite from us to, in Crescent Point, to kind of exclusively work with Impossible to get this over the line. I've seen projects like similar to this get caught up in discussions around IP or discussions around working with other companies and you know, a coalition or a collaboration of companies, and that isn't what I wanted to do at all. And okay, you guys have the IP, I have the problem, and I want the solution. And the quicker we can get to that, the better. And so I think that was the real focus for us at the beginning of the year, was to get a way to get more money into their hands to bring this to commercialization this year. And that was priority one. Like, let's get after this, because it can just get bogged down in bureaucracy or whatever, legal, God, bring lawyers in and watch it come to a court in home.
Sorry, lawyers.
Yeah.
And just, is there anything about what they had? Is there anything about what they had that made it easier, right? So like IP wasn't an issue, but you know, one thing I think maybe not all startups understand is the degree of improvement, right? So when you told them about a Walmart solution, It's not like they gave you the bait, to sort of take this analogy, right? Like they were able to really deliver something like that. Is it something to where you guys have to see a real big material improvement, or would you consider like sort of an increment if it was just a little bit better?
From the test, you mean?
Yeah.
The test did what we needed it to do, right? But now it's properly testing in all field. You got to remember, we have wells in minus 40 degree and plus 40 degree weather, so you need to test all those extremes, and that it can't stop working. There's more testing that has to happen, and I know there's refinements that have to happen, but there's such hope with what we have as a prototype. And so, and it was that constant iterative loop of meeting and seeing progress. I guess that was the biggest thing for me as, I guess, arguably we're an investor as a company. It was seeing progress, like tangible, legitimate progress, not just hand waving, not just, screenshots of, some CAD drawings or things like that. Like there was you could tell there was significant progress with it, and that's what kept the hope alive.
Awesome.
And the funding alive.
Well, for them especially. Kara, you gave us a little bit of insight into the things that they did well. You were talking earlier also in the break room, government's not known for being especially fast. Tell us maybe what are some of those things, again, for the startups in the room in particular, to where, we were talking about telling someone that their baby's ugly. Okay, so that maybe their company is not as amazing as they think they are. So they obviously had some things working in their favor. They had the market pull. They were able to demonstrate it. For the ones who kind of don't go very far in the process or see it kind of go really slow, can you tell us what is almost the negative? What's the flip side of things, right? We talked about some of the positive things that can really get interest from Alberta Innovates. What's some of the things that give you pause?
Sure, for sure. So there's a couple things. So with Impossible Sensing, their solution, and even where it is now, it's at the bench scale level, but there's opportunity to really scale it up, to do that additional testing, those kinds of things. And because industry wants their solution, right? And one of the things that we're always looking at is it a problem that you are telling industry they need, or that they need the solution to, or is it industry saying, you know what, we have a problem, we need someone to solve it? And that's a huge difference, right? We've had people come from industry who, think that they have a really good idea because they've been in industry and see that there's a need. But when they actually tried to sell it to industry, there wasn't interest, right? Because industry looked at it and it wasn't a big enough economical advantage. It wasn't a big enough advantage for them when it came to productivity. And so ultimately, it wasn't worth their time to implement. So it was a situation where what they assumed that industry wanted wasn't necessarily what that was actually the case, right? They didn't actually go out and talk to their customer and do that research and make those decisions based on the feedback and the data that they received. And I was saying that the hardest thing is to tell a client who has invested, their life savings, their time, their energies, another mortgage on their house on an idea that maybe doesn't have the legs or the traction, to actually turn into a viable business or a commercializable business. And that's the hardest part of my job, is having those conversations and knowing that there's real people at the other end of that, who this is a huge impact on their life and moving forward. So we're always very much looking for ideas and for companies that, they've done the legwork, that they've been out there and they've talked to others in their industry. They've talked to potential clients, right? That they've got the feedback, that they know the problem they're trying to solve, and they know the value of that problem, right? Is it $1 million problem, or is it a $5 problem?
Let's do a quick follow-up on that, because there was something, actually, we had a great discussion earlier, and one of the things Ariel was saying, that as a founder, you gotta love your baby, right?
Yeah.
Even if no one else does. So to take this analogy a little bit further, when you give that feedback to someone, what is almost the best outcome that you would hope that they would do with that, right? Because you don't want them to kind of toss it out and say, you know what, you're right, I'm going to give up, and my mortgage is tied up on this, and there's no conviction in that. Yeah. And at the same time, if they don't incorporate the feedback or think about it, then that's not a good outcome either. So when you're giving this really, really hard, honest feedback, what are you hoping that they're going to do with that?
And so the whole baby's ugly analogy is that nobody ever tells you, your baby's ugly. And it's the heart. You don't believe your baby's ugly, right? Everybody thinks their baby's beautiful.
Pat might. I think Pat might tell you your baby's ugly.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I have like a posse, and at the time I thought they were all beautiful, and in hindsight, maybe not so much. But the thing is that there's learning in the failure. There's great lesson. There's no success without failure, right? There's no lessons learned without trying something new and taking that leap of faith, right? And so you have to balance that love of that baby and the passion for your idea and the strong belief that you can be successful with, the reality and the economics and the actual data that you collect. And so when I'm delivering that news, my hope is that they take that, don't lose your entrepreneurial spirit, right? Because it's still in there. But take what you've learned and apply that for the next time. Like we fail, first attempt in learning is something that we say often. And so what have you learned through this? What were the lessons learned? How are you going to apply that next time? And that's really where the magic is, because entrepreneurs are always entrepreneurs. And the good ones, the real ones, will find a way to be successful and will take those lessons and will get there in the end.
Mm-hmm. Rob, you touched upon something with regards to Ariel, which is you said that one of the big advantages, especially of meeting with them regularly, is you got to see that, they were the real deal effectively. That when you give them feedback, they incorporate it. It's not just hand waving and stuff like that. Again, for the founders, I'm thinking, what should they know before they engage with a corporate or industry player? Or what is something that you wish more people know? I bet there's a bunch of people, maybe you're meeting them in the street, maybe they're going to talk to you afterwards, they've got the solution for you, they've got the solution. If only Crescent would buy on or do a pilot, it would kind of make it and everyone would be happy. But that's not always the case. I think we have the makings of a good relationship here, but what are some of the things that people should know before they come and approach an industry player?
Yeah, I think quite simply it's listening. Start by listening. And I know that sounds obvious, but it often doesn't begin there. And it starts by talking, selling, pitching. And I felt like that was the difference. That was a difference when brought Impossible Sensing in, saying, hey, we don't know your problem. We have these Mars rovers and using these lasers and optics that can do all sorts of things, but what is your problem? Maybe it fits, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. What is your problem? And it was that. It was tell me your problem. I'm not going to tell you my solution, and then let's figure out how your problem fits into my solution. Just tell me your problem.
Speaking of, so you guys have also had a little bit of a pivot, because you're starting out in space, you're finding this application in energy, and now with Pathways Alliance, which we talked about, you folks beat out 50 other competitors to win this global prize, and that was trying to find different ways of reducing, of accelerating the use of steam reducing tech in oil sands. So we're going from traditional oil and gas, now we're looking at the oil sands, right? What was that about? Is it the same approach? Is it saying, listening to the problem and saying, hey, we could do something about that? And also, why do that when you're already so busy with this existing customer? Walk us through that a little bit.
That's a long question.
Yeah,
okay.
It's loaded a little bit.
So, yeah, the approach was the same. The approach is exactly the same. Listening to what these guys wanted. And we were listening to them for over a year before we won that award. I want to say that we have home advantage over the other competitors worldwide, because we were here, we understand the problem. I'm also coming from oil and gas. My partner is the space guy, so we knew the problem very close, and we knew that we had some sort of a fit with what we were doing for Rob and Crescent. So, and I just talked to some Power Alliance guy before coming here, and he told me, be proud to say that your solution was better than the others. So I'm saying it.
Okay.
So that, I think that's what it was. Also, I'm not sure if it is really common for oil and gas to actually look for solutions outside of the industry or outside of the guys that are coming and knocking your door offering you a solution. And that's exactly what they did. They went out worldwide and they look everywhere. And of course, they realized that there aren't any solutions specifically for their problems. Some of the oil sand problems are so specific that there's nothing out there that is being built that can be fit into it. So I guess home advantage.
Home advantage, and it's just better than the rest.
That's right.
Nothing wrong with that. Kara, these applications of deep tech, they're very exciting, but they often carry a lot of risk.
Yes.
And again, we talked about government is not necessarily known for moving fast, and it's not necessarily known for loving risk. So how is someone like Alberta Innovates, which is a major funder within the province, especially in the area of innovation, how do you think about risk?
Calculated risk, measured risk, right? And so in the case of impossible sensing, they had already de-risked their opportunity with their engagement with Pathways, with their engagement with Crescent Point, right? They had been in those meetings listening to what the problem was, right? And then validating, creating their own solution. And so because of that, they were able to give a solution to the actual problem instead of putting a Band-Aid on something and not totally addressing the problem correctly. So when we have multiple clients like Ariel, we're looking at things like, have you done your homework? Have you done your market research, right? Have you talked to potential clients? Do you know what your market size is? What's your market in Alberta, in Canada, North America, the world, right? What is your opportunity? Because something that we love in Alberta is we love to provide Alberta solutions to the world. So if there's a solution that we have found here that we can solve that problem elsewhere, that's wonderful. That's bringing revenues back into the province. That's creating more jobs here, right? It's putting our name on the map as, really kind of being leaders in that innovative sector. It's about surrounding yourself with really great people. Do you have an advisory committee? Do you have people who understand your industry, right? Who are you working with? Are you working with us like Startup Calgary, Edmonton Unlimited? Are you taking advantage of the regional innovation system that we have in Alberta, right? Are you surrounding yourself with really great people who also have really great contacts and can be a really good triage? I may not know the answer, I may not have the contact, but I have such an incredible network, not just with my colleagues within the TDA group, but in all of Alberta Innovates and beyond, that I'm able to help connect some of those entrepreneurs with those other solution providers that they need to help them move forward. And I think that the one thing Alberta Innovates has done that nobody has really been able to replicate across the country is our whole Alberta Innovates network, right? So we have 7 regional networks throughout the province. Those networks are all like-minded economic development agencies that partner with industry, that partner with post-secondary institutions, right? That are making sure that all of our entrepreneurs have the same access to supports no matter where they are, right? And making sure that we have, the education piece and the technology piece to really help increase that innovation the vibration of innovation across the province. And so someone like Ariel, right? So we have Pathways Alliance who came from industry. Then we were connecting to Crescent Point, right? Then we brought in the government piece, which is Alberta Innovates. And through that, we've also now connected with SAIT and the Technology Access Center there that is funded through the federal government to have more work done on this project, because yes, we did a successful pilot, but now we need to scale that, right? Now we need to test, can we do it in 40 below? Can we do it in Fort McMurray? Can we do it in Calgary, right? Let's talk about wind. Let's talk about all of those other things that we have that will impact this technology and impact it, on a well in Lloydminster, in Yellowknife, in Quebec, wherever it might be, right? Or in Texas.
And one thing too, and we were also talking about this, is maybe you can kind of clarify, you don't work exclusively on oil and gas.
No.
As a TDA. And so if you find that there is an adjacent use case for something like what they're doing, you're able to kind of make that connection. Can you tell folks about that? Because I think most people don't know that.
Sure. So I'm a bit of the oil and gas girl within our group. I came from an oil and gas portfolio and agriculture as well. But within my colleagues, like we have software, we have IT, we have manufacturing, and then even beyond with our others. And of course, Alberta Innovates, we have health, we have clean tech, we have all these different kind of major pillars And then within each of those groups, they're solving challenges, right? And so I engaged early on. We engaged the clean tech group with Ariel's team, right? We brought them in just so that they were aware of what was happening, to see if they had anything in their portfolio that might also work, right? We're also fortunate to be connected to Innotech and CFER as well, right? Our sister organizations that have those experts and have those researchers that we can also connect our companies to. So I have clients in my portfolio, anything from software to health, whatever. And I don't need to be an expert, they're the expert. My job is to connect them to the supports that they need so that they can be successful. And every time I meet with a client, my goal is that they've taken something out of that's helped them move forward in some way. And and sometimes it's, the baby's ugly and we need to look at a pivot, or, we need to look at something else here. But hopefully somehow in their journey, we've helped them, achieve a small goal.
Folks, I'm just going to let you know in about 5 minutes we're going to open it up to questions, so please get ready. I hope that you've got some good ones. Otherwise, I could sit here and do this all day. So this is your opportunity to know that you can ask questions. Rob, we started out when I talked to Carol on the last one about risk. How do they evaluate risk? What does risk look like from a Crescent point of view? How are you guys evaluating risk, mitigating risk, especially when you're working with an early stage startup?
Yeah, I like to, I used to work for a company years ago, and the CEO had this expression, and he said, always focus on the upside. And it helps you kind of put that risk concern at bay. I'm not saying to be crazy and spending money. So we tried to, we found the most innovative way, we thought, to fund this and to get the ball rolling. Like, the hardest part was getting started, for sure. Building a trust with Impossible, finding a way to start to explore ideas without spending money. Like, early on, I don't know what you were living on air or something. We weren't paying the money. I don't know what. At the beginning, there was a, but that was enough to start to build the trust. Seeing how hard these guys got after it, and then we were able to adopt more risk. So we saw the upside, said this is worth entering, and we felt it wasn't very risky to dip our toes into this. And then once started trusting and believing that this could really turn into something, then I was willing to put some money forward.
May I add?
Yeah, of course.
I think the investment is both ways. The same way that Crescent believed that we could do it. When you're working for someone, you're looking for a customer that wants to help you.
Yeah.
And that's why we stayed for the long way. And we had probably 3 or 4 months where there was no money coming in, but it was engaging, and we knew that Crescent had a problem and they wanted to solve it.
So even though there wasn't, money on the table, they had skin in the game and they were invested in your success.
Absolutely.
Can I add some
Yeah, of
about
course.
risk? And so of course we look at financial risk, right? And do they have runway? But the whole points of our funding programs at Alberta Innovates is to help de-risk that investment a little bit for the company, and especially in a situation like this where industry's at the table as well, right? And to help de-risk it a little bit so that they have a bit of breathing room to go after it and to be successful, right? So ultimately, that's kind of the goal of our funding, is to give them a bit of that breathing room, to recognize that they do have some runway and help support them on that.
Last quick question before we open it up to the audience. Kara alluded to this, where she talked about supporting solutions that bring Alberta to the world. I know that we, in some of our conversations, have mentioned that, maybe some people, potential investors and others, have suggested that this might be better suited to being done in the U.S.
Yeah.
So let's be honest here, we probably have some policymakers in the room, right?
Yeah.
You want this to be a Made-in-Alberta solution. You want this to remain an Alberta company.
Yes.
What are some of the things that are definitely pulling in that favor, and what are some of the things, if we were to look to the lower 48, that we could adopt here and that would definitely make your life a little bit easier?
Yeah. So I'll start from a personal point of view. I lived in the U.S. before. I chose Canada to be my home. You can see from my accent that I'm not from here, right? So this is the place where I want to be. And we came here, and we found all these ecosystems of government, customers, accelerators. I mean, everything is here to get things done. Yes, it is easier to do it on the lower 48, hands down.
What specifically?
So getting access to capital. On the customer side, I don't think there's a difference, right? But on the government side, yes. In fact, we just received a grant from NASA where we applied together. So, NASA is giving us money to work as a Canadian company. And it took 2 weeks.
So that's not happening here?
No. Well, you can hear the folks. Yeah.
Cool.
So I
Okay.
think that's
I think
to
I just
improve.
took that one to the
Now,
heart.
listen, I wasn't going to go hard, Carabao. We had to give a little. We had to sprinkle a little bit of, get some fire under y'all too. Okay.
But with that being said, I don't know if you have another
Yeah, no, go.
other question, but I just want to, kudos to Alberta Innovates, right? So they understood very well that we want to be here. And it's also very rewarding to work with someone that understands the province, because we're also dealing with federal agencies, and the treatment is completely different.
Yeah.
Right? So we really like that. We really like to work with people that understand the industry, understands the needs, and understands that you want to stay here.
Awesome. Any questions, folks? Yes, go ahead. Can I just ask one thing? If you just be a little bit louder, we don't have a mic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is for Kara.
Hi.
Multi-part one. You mentioned that you like to see solutions for problems that are coming from industry. Did Crescent Point and Impossible apply together? If they didn't, do your processes encourage SMEs to bring in their enterprise clients into the application? And how often does that happen?
Sure. So the application we're currently working through with Impossible Sensing, the partner is actually SAIT and who they're working with there. However, because Crescent Point is involved, we love to see that evidence of support from the client, right? So a letter saying, you know what, this is the solution that we need, this is what we see the application. There are programs that we have where bringing industry to the table is a requirement, right, to have a strong program partner. My colleagues back there, Lori and Sandra, we have, for example, the product demonstration where one of the key pieces of that program is having a strong project partner who is industry and bringing them to the table. If you're able to demonstrate that industry is keenly interested in what you're doing through a letter, through whatever, that adds huge weight to de-risking it from us, because you're immediately validating your market, right? By showing you have a prospective client, somebody that's interested, somebody that's watching what you're doing, that's huge from our point of view.
Any other questions? We had one here. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a question to understand the difference between the application of the conventional technology and the application of the TIP technology, and how the TIP technology differentiates from the
Let me see if I understand the question correctly. What is already there and what are we bringing and how they are different?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like Rob was saying, what we are doing here is, this is a multi-phase flow meter, what we are building, right? This is nothing new. Multi-phase flow meters have been in this industry for the last 20 years. But if you want a multi-phase flow meter that works, they're extremely expensive. So the ones that you can somehow Frankenstein something and get it to $50,000-$60,000, which is what Crescent did, right?
Yeah.
And you can get multiple things. You can get Coriolis meters, you can get orifice meters, ultrasonic meters, put them all together and come up with a solution. Now, you want a good multi-phase flow meter that works, that's $150,000 to $250,000. And the market penetration of these meters tells you the story. It's no more than 5% on land wells. Yeah, it's like 20% offshore, where you have really high productions and you can pay for them. So what we did there, and most of the ones that work, they use radioactive sources. They are mini, small X-ray machines or NMR machines. The ones that are at the hospital and they cost like $5 million each, right? So that's the technology that is being developed and it works. So what we did is we used optical technology. And that's the reason why we were able to bring it down in cost. Now, like I said before, and this is why I started with the amount of money that NASA spent on it. NASA spent $200 million developing this. So they completely de-risk it. I'm sure that the big oil field companies have spent the same amount of money on those X-ray machines too, right? But we were able to take that, because we were part of that development, we were able to take that and adapt it.
Yeah.
Hopefully I answered your question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for Ariel.
Yeah.
Opposed to a lot of with solar steam. I'm just curious, maybe two-part question. How many clients and customers do you have right now? And what is your customer acquisition roadmap or pathway?
Yeah, so right now we have 2 customers really, which actually is 6 in total, because Pathways Alliance is 5 companies we're actually engaging with, and Crescent Point. And our acquisition rate is slow because we're starting and we don't want to dilute ourselves too much. So we have actually more than one product. We have this multi-phase flow meter, but we also have a methane detection system for high altitude, right? And we also have some, we developed this system that can actually tell you how much carbon is in soil that you can put into a combine. I mean, the whole idea of the company is to, if you can avoid the emissions, right, use these meters, remove your separators. Separators are known to have certain emissions associated with it, 50 to 250 tons per year. So that if you have a lot of wells, makes a big impact, right? At the same time, you now have full production visibility, and you can leverage that, right? Things that you didn't have before. You can pay for all these things. And if you cannot do that, if you cannot avoid emissions, you can actually measure them. Those are the other solutions. And you can also demonstrate that, hey, if this is my level of emissions, I can offset them.
Any last questions? Yeah.
Question for Ariel. You developed this technology with the support from NASA, right? In terms of holding the IP to the company, was there any issue you had to deal with?
Yeah, no, it's, funny enough, all the technology that NASA develops is not IP logged. You can actually get it. You just need to know where to look for it.
What does that mean?
So there's most
Because I'm going to go look for some IP after this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the majority of the technology that they develop is open for take. They only log what is sensitive, military sensitive, right? So you can actually go in there and take that technology. What we did is we took technology from NASA, and then we put it in a different architecture, and we patented that. You are allowed to do that. Yeah.
Anyone else? Last questions. Maybe I have one. Oh, Pat, go ahead.
So Rob, you talked about the technology that you need. And I think what I see a lot of is people are developing their tech on the deep tech side for one application. How did they get educated in what you guys do? Because it seems like you need a person to be there and understand both sides to connect the dots. Is there any better way of connecting the dots on this?
Yeah, that's it. And that's exactly what happened, right? Was having Scott, our old CEO, be that matchmaker and saying, you two should talk. Because he understood the problem and he saw hope in the solution. How do you, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know the easy answer to how to get those collisions where you're in the room together and you might have something that lines up. Are there events for stuff like that? Did I just walk right into it?
No, well, no, but you're correct, right? In that one of the things that we struggle with and entrepreneurs struggle with is knowing what exactly that is. And ever since I was at post-secondary, I've always been a strong advocate that government, post-secondary, industry, and community all need to be at the same table, right? You need to be talking about the challenges in your community facing your industry, right? How post-secondary can help, like SAIT is in this situation, how industry is involved like you are, right? And then how that goes down, like creates like jobs and revenues and all the things. And so we don't do a great job as industry talking about what our challenges are. We struggle, and this is something we see with Pathways sometimes, is they struggle at their own table where they're supposed to be, colleagues, even though they're competitors working on solutions together, but nobody wants to give anything up, right? And so I know we've been fortunate at Alberta Innovates where we've had some grand challenges, right? That industry has come to us and said, here's a challenge, can we put it out there and see if anybody has any solution? But I think that I think industry needs to be better about talking about what they are missing solutions for. But also, entrepreneurs sometimes don't necessarily recognize that industry doesn't necessarily want to build it themselves. If they can buy it from you, if you already have it, that's a much easier solution. So it's just about having, and I think that within our role at Alberta Innovates, we have the opportunity to connect with industry, to connect with those entrepreneurs, right, and have the government there, that we're sometimes aware of some of those opportunities, and places like here, right, like at Inventures or CDL and some of the other events that we're fortunate to be at, is to have those conversations and to talk about the opportunities that are out there.
Yeah, it just seems so random, right? That Scott needs to be in the room where he hears this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because during the early kind of Web 2.0 days in the kind of early 2000s, there was these sites where companies would post these super hard technical challenges, but they were really minor. There were these small things that, like for instance, Procter & Gamble put a project on there that says, oh, we need a toothpaste tube that does this, and it was a $100,000 project. But it was nowhere near the kind of importance where you put core tech specs on there, where companies could really sink their teeth into.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's a saying or a story, how this was told to me is Einstein was once quoted. I don't know. Someone can Google this and tell me something. But he said, if I was given an hour to solve the world's biggest problem, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes solving it.
Yeah.
And I feel like we don't talk about our problems enough. I sound like a counselor. We don't talk about
That's what this is actually about. This was actually a covert therapy session,
right.
so thank you very much.
And we don't, and when we define the problem, like it's funny because I think of other ideas through my career, other companies we've worked with that, had solutions, and I realized when we got to the end of it, it never really went places. It didn't get commercialized. It seemed like a good idea at times, but it never. And I think it was not properly defining the problem up front, and then you end up deviating as the path never. You guys all know this, right? It's always this meandering trail to the solution, and it ends up being somewhere different than where you thought it would be. And like you mentioned in the Web 2.0 days, and these people defining these problems, I think this was this problem we really had to find. We cannot cheaply test wells, and if we could, boy, the opportunity is big. So I think it was the crystallization of that defined, simple problem, and I guess it flies in the face of the website you're talking about from back then, where maybe they didn't define them well enough back then. But I think that's what really helped us in this case, was really defining that problem and crystallizing what it was.
Yeah, and
We're
it's
gonna-
hard to define.
Yeah, we're going to leave it there. We're about to get the hook. That's a great spot to end it. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, everyone here. I hope you have a great Inventures, and we'll see you out there.